Hello, welcome back to Sea Wolf's Den. I'm Crafting Ron. I'm out in my garage on my workbench outside because I'm probably going to do one of the biggest crafts I've ever done. Now, years ago, or a couple years ago, I did a crash site with the body of a Kenner B-Wing and one of these. I kind of merged them together, and I'll throw up pictures of that. I kind of want to one-up that, and I want to take what I have here and create a massive, I wouldn't call it a capital ship, but it's definitely a large ship for 28mm scale. And if I do this right, I want to do some internal stuff to the ship. Now, my journey with this started with just this one piece, which has been used for another craft, as you can tell. Came in a eBay purchase many years ago. And then in another eBay purchase, this came along, and I'm like, well, shoot, I've already used that piece. So I never went back and said, let's do something with it. I just left this piece in the craft. Well, that craft never really got used, and it was for a contest, and it was definitely not my best work, we'll just say. So I have since taken it apart and threw away most of those pieces. This, of course, is the classic Millennium Falcon. And I didn't get a lot of course, we're missing the cockpit cover, missing most of the parts of the blaster, of the cannon, but I did get those and another. This was broken, I've glued it from another lot. So I've got that. I've since taken the Falcon apart, and of course you have to say Falcon, not Falcon, because that's the way Harrison Ford says it. And I'm thinking, like I said, create a large scale ship that players can fight around and maybe even fight inside to some degree. Now this had a little piece of cardboard that created the wall, and then all these internals were here. I'm hoping that I can at least create an inside up to this point. So what I'm trying to do, I'm going to cut it here, maybe cut it around, and then have this piece come out and glue it back to this, so that we would have at least the back half from here to here, back half to mess with. Now if I get rid of these landing gear, I can get rid of these containers for the landing gear. Who knows, I might leave them, we'll see. I may end up having to glue them. For the cannon, I know it goes into here, but we'll deal with that later. But what I'm going to do is cut the cockpit off. Cut this part of the cockpit off. Cut that off and make it symmetrical, which is always something in part of my brain that bothered me about the Millennium Falcon, was that it wasn't symmetrical. And then add some parts. Got the pod. Probably add these, and I'm thinking about cutting them right here, adding them to the side. Now, does that mess me up? Probably, for whatever internals I decide to do. So I'm going to have to come up with a way that this still comes off and this remains there. These will be like bridge or operations or something, and I'll cover these up like I did the other craft and make this kind of a bridge. I got to take the landing gear out, which I might use for this ship, and get rid of these things. These things are just a hassle. One thing I want to do right now is take this apart and see what I've got in this. Okay, this is kind of a version of, I guess, Kylo Ren's ship, which will give me some great satisfaction taking it apart. Let's take a look at this, because I have an idea. Like, there's two sections to this. There's this forward section, and then the wings. I'm not so sure about the back end, but the front end might be able to fit in here. I'm trying to make it less and less like, it will still look like the Millennium Falcon, but we get a lot of these screws right here for these wings, because there's a whole mechanism. I'll probably end up losing that functionality, but nothing I can do about it. Yep, I thought it'd be a different kind of assembly. Springs for the launcher. This is what I really wanted to take out, was these arms. I think they had another section on here that snapped onto these things. I don't know. I think I did find it at some point online. Well, I had hoped that, I really didn't examine it too closely, but the brown pieces would come off without any trouble, but they are going to be trouble. So, taking all its bits and pieces off, leaving the basics. If I strip it down, it looks better. Once again, just not in the sections that I like. So I'm going to look at this from this point of view. Okay, so what am I missing here? That can go back in. What I want to do, really, I'm going to miss the cockpit. That drives me nuts. And it's scaled again for an action figure, so I'm not really too worried about it. I can cover that up. A dome, or some kind of bobble that will cover that up. This, on the other hand, I probably will stick in there. This, where the arms came out, I might cover that up. But I guess if I cut it here, right there, right across the straight line, or maybe diagonal down this way, I could do that. Now the two sections, one will probably fit, and I would have to cut through here, losing that detail. Okay, and that would be the front section. This, now I could cut here, and then still utilize this end, but maybe just this part, or maybe just this part, or both, and stick one on top, one on the other, with wings sticking out, or maybe take the wings off. I don't know. I could cut the wings off, or cut it here. I don't know. But I could do that. Have this as, I can find a dome to fit that, some kind of ball, and cut it off like a Christmas ball or something. Cover that up. I think I could use that to kind of start detailing this out. That in the front end, these two on the side. I got other stuff laying out here that I'm not so sure I'm going to use. I've got two of these, and one I think I had an idea for, and I didn't want to do both. But if I cut this apart, I like the engines, and that's another thing I want to do. I'm going to cut just this section out. The old Millennium Falcon engine section out. Back here, I'm going to build out of baubles, applesauce tops and other things, new engines that will stick out a little bit further. And then I'll probably make this section right here, once I get rid of the stickers and all that, and that section right there will be an engine room, big enough for a couple of minis. Probably from this wall to this wall, I'll create a new wall that sits right there. These sections will be other things that I'll work on, and then I'll make new sections here, cover this up with something. It's going to be a big project. It'll take me a while. Until next time.
Okay, we're back with perhaps the biggest craft I've ever planned. I set out to first kind of plan out what the internals were and how much of the internals I can do. I've glued what you call the access panel to the overall superstructure. I did a couple other things too. I'll show you. Marking off all the parts I'm planning on cutting. And then I did this. I planned out the deck. And yeah, that's what I'm planning on doing is just have this on top. And then when the players go inside, I'll lift it up. Just as conventional as you can imagine. There's a lot of room in this model, in this toy. I don't have the landing gear on right now. And I'm planning on doing different landing gear. And so this is just an idea that I threw together. Now these are foam core that I cut out to fit. And likely these will be templates rather than the actual thing I use. I'm probably going to put them on cardboard, and then the cardboard will be in this, and I'll paint that up. Based on this, it's just like I'm going to have engineering. I'm going to have some room here, a hallway, something inside there. I don't know. And all right, so this was supposed to be a hallway into room A, another room B, and then I don't think this was meant to do anything. Sorry, this is a mess. All right, so this is the room, and then there's going to be another room D. There we go. I think that's right. Or we may, this is not meant to be, I screwed up. Doing in between cutting the two, I messed up on my map. So this would be the hallway, and I'll have to cut that way. And that will go into B, which could be the bridge, but I don't think so. I need it, but I do need a hallway that goes all the way around. It doesn't look like I've got that. So I may have to redraw it. Kind of the general idea is to kind of have an engineering and a couple more rooms, and these rooms will access what I'm going to mount outside of here, which is cloud pods. I'm going to turn the battery bay into an airlock. I'm going to cut these ridges off with like a Dremel and then put a door here, and I may even use the battery door there because it turns out it's about the size of a miniature. Once you get rid of the ridges, hold the battery on here too, so I'm going to just cut right into there and leave the walls. I'm not really sure if I need to do that on the top because you're not going to put miniatures down on it. I'm going to put miniatures down on this. The hallway will lead into the pods, and I'm debating, that's the next phase, is to figure, or next design phase, is to figure out if I'm going to cut those pods in half. They're glued together, they're not screwed together, and so they have to come apart in order for me to have miniatures go in there. This is going to get cut. This is my next phase, is I am going to cut this so it will sit here. I'm going to cut right along there, and this will fit inside here. May have to cut some of these walls off to let that rest, or I might cut these. It may not matter, but I want to save this part, this dome, because I think it'll look great. Just kind of picture it without it right up top here, and I think I could put a cannon right there, and it would be, the wings will be gone. So I'll cut all that off, maybe even leave these, who knows. I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm just mounting up there and just really kit bash. It's not really kit bash, it's bashing old toys, but it's just kit bash kind of is the term people use. Also, I didn't have one of these, which was the old ramp. I printed this out because there's a lot of free STLs that you can use to repair, replace old Kenner toy parts, and this is one of the free parts, so I glued that down. It's not coming off. My plan is to cut right across there to have this ready, and this will come out. Now I'll cover that up with something flat. Maybe I can mirror this a little bit better so it'll match. There's not much to mirror, so I may just flatten it out and put a couple things down and make it look pretty good. Forgot to take the stickers off. That's one mistake I made. I took stickers off of the inside of this, but it didn't. I don't know if that come right off. Well, never mind that then, I guess. So that's it. That's my plan. I'm going to go ahead and cut this and start planning this out, and hopefully this will work. Okay, first steps were to cut up the Darth Maul ship into its individual pieces that I'm going to use. I used a lot of it, but as it turns out, I also used some of it for a second craft that we'll just call the bonus craft for now. I'll show you that in a minute. This all started when I cut the wings off of the Darth Maul ship. I saw those as something I could use, and I had a old droid fighter that were missing some pieces, and I had the pod racer, the cockpit itself, and I wanted to kind of see if I could merge these into some kind of ship. It was more of an experiment to kind of make sure that I had the skills to kit bash the larger ship. I didn't want to ruin the larger ship until I knew that I could do these things, and it was kind of a confidence booster to boot. So I pivoted away from the bigger ship to just focus on the smaller ship to see what I could do with that. I also do some experimenting with like modeler's putty, hot glue, electrical tape even, and some 3D printing as well. See if I can make these like one. I didn't want them to end up looking like 2, 3 toys slapped together. I wanted them to look like one piece. So this is how it started. I never videoed it because I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, but here are some pictures of my progress. I will, in the end, show you the final product, which I think turned out pretty good, but not great. Table ready as far as I'm concerned. I really like how this turned out. Okay, well, I skipped recording one part and went ahead and cut the cockpit off the Millennium Falcon. Big hole there now that I will have to Dremel and clean and cover up somehow. The next part and that section, and I'm not really sure how I'm going to do this because cut into that and it's not going to go anywhere. It's just in the worst place possible. I might be able to get it deeper in there. I can't really see my marks. So I'm better off using a Dremel and try to be clean and nice. I might use my high power one. So we'll see. Let's see how this goes. Very warm day in South Carolina. All right, my biggest concern was something like right here. Looked like it might, right here looks like it overlaps, so I'm okay. So if I put a piece of plastic over this and a piece of plastic over this and dress it up with some greebles, I think it'll be fine. I've downloaded some 3D prints of other greebles that might work for me, and we'll just dress it up and kind of not necessarily match it here, but at least make it look uniform. I may not need to do a whole lot based on this. I wish I could just print a section off like that and do it again. We shall see, but not the disaster I was scared it would be. We'll just have to move on to the next step. I had to use a Dremel tool, which turned out to be a little messier than I wanted. It just didn't turn out as well as I wanted it, but I was able to figure out a way to cover it up. At least the top part. I used some clear plastic, and initially I used electrical tape to tape it down and tape all the edges. I ended up changing a little bit of that later. I wasn't pleased with the initial look of it. Covering up the side hole was the struggle. As it turns out, I had a spare greeble that would fit there that's left over from another eBay purchase, so I replaced the clear plastic I had originally put there with that. Once I solved that problem, I took some greebles and some thin plastic sheets and cut them up in sort of a paneling pattern and placed them, glued them. Actually ended up using some very thin soldering wire to separate them, and then used a coffee stirrer to cover up the edge of that thin plastic to give it more of a metal look. In my attempt to redo this, took all the electrical tape off. That wasn't really working for me. The cockpit is gone right here. The old cockpit, and I worked on it. I'm not sure if it's going to work, so anytime I don't know if it's going to work or not, I kind of don't spend time filming it. But this worked out okay. Had some plastic, clear plastic, which turned out to be advantageous because you can see what you're doing on all sides and you can trace things and stuff like that. And I'm going to paint over it eventually, but I put a piece of plastic over the cut on the top half of the ship. I've been working on this side. Originally, I put another piece of plastic like that, and it worked okay. Notice I'm using electrical tape kind of smooth out the edges, and then I cover it up with some greebles. That's what all this is, some 40K greebles and some woody greebles. I plan on printing out some more to dress up all of this to make it more detailed and less like the Millennium Falcon. I did not like this. It was bothering me kind of hanging out this part of it. since I've gone so far with it, I have to kind of leave it here and figure out what I'm going to do this. And I think there's more work to be done. I think I need a little bit more overhang off this. But instead of this, I realized I coincidentally had an extra one of these. Now, what are these? And you can see why I tend to go outside with this one, because it's so big. I've taken them off here. They're the kind of side greebles that they put on here, right there. Taking them off. They just mount on the side like that. And I just so happened to have a spare. I got it in another auction, but this is not fitting right. I was thinking about putting it on the inside to help me out with the overhang. Make some cuts. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect fit. I think I need to clear out some of that cut and make it square. So I'm going to work on that. A couple things I've done also, as you saw, is the top back on. This thing's so big, I much prefer to be outside. Mounted the bottom half of that ship that I cut up, guessing it's the Kylo Ren ship. I've got several pieces that I've used for this, and this I plan on putting on top. I had a gun from the Millennium Falcon, so I kind of glued it in on there to kind of make it more like a heavier cannon look. Had another thing I'd put together, a missile launcher that I was using in another project. Decided to mount it here, and obviously the greebles. I'd done these greebles when this was part of another craft. I'm going to leave them here. I kind of like it, but they're going to get painted over. This whole thing's going to get painted. As for the deck, you saw that I made a template out of 2 pieces of foam core, and I took that template, put it over some cardboard, braced it out, and then worked it into the base of the Falcon until it finally fit. This fits in perfectly. I'm going to put some granny grade over top of it, glue it down, and I'm debating on, because this stops a little too right about there. And so this is stopping things. So I want to cut that. And what I'm thinking about doing is making this the ramp. I may even make it functional and make that the ramp on board. So that will have to come out. I have to guess. Let's see. Let's trace that to make sure we know where it's going to be. So when we lay the floor plan, it can handle that. Always got to kind of think ahead a couple times. Again, this is all going to get painted. This is where the ramp's going to be, which still works out. I haven't really kind of made a plan for that forward section. What I'm thinking about doing is cutting this off, making the cruise quarters, this engineering, and I think what I'll do is wall these off and make these different rooms, maybe tactical. There's going to be a gun here, or a big gun, and this will be like how you get on board. This still is going to be the airlock. I've got to cut that up, and may do a room here. These are going to go off to the pods that I'm going to put out here. I'm still working that out. Tore up the pods, took the seats out. They reused the seats as the ramp because they look really good. Just have to cut them up. But I was looking at it like I'd done before, like this. The ship that I did before, and I had this up on top, facing the forward section of the ship. I'm debating on just swapping it this way to make it look different, so that these are the back end, and I can mount something on here to make it look like have these hang off here. Now, my trouble that I'm struggling with right now is just how do I mount these on here, and I think I just saw how I'm going to do it. I'm going to cut it straight down the middle, straight down this middle, and if I leave enough of this, I can just cut here and let this hang on and then glue that down into here. Now, how does that translate to the floor plan? Not very well, obviously. So this will have to be dressed up with maybe a door. Cover this up with something plastic, and then make these the bridge, or bridge 1 and 2, or something like that. Bridge and auxiliary bridge, or split up the thing. I already see a pattern here where I can paint what would look like a window. I did that before on the old one, B-Wing mashup. So we'll do that. Cut it now. Does that mean I mean that only means that I can't make this part of the floor plan. It's just too much. Because these are glued together. I'm afraid I might break it if in the wrong place if I cut. So that's that.
That's going in the front, and I've already marked off where I'm going to start cutting. Now, the other thing, another big thing that I have to figure out, and I haven't mentioned this before. Well, these aren't great colors, but I'm going to work it out. I got this whole string of, they're Halloween lights, but they're amber is really the color. There they go. And as you can see, I got a good string of them, and they can alternate. While I'm not a fan of the color, I think it'll still look pretty good. So I'm thinking about just going around the edges and let the light come up from underneath. Maybe poke some holes in places, or put it underneath the granny grade. Now the hard part is, what do I do with this big old box? We got the classic smuggler compartment. If I do that and then run this along here with each light, right? How do I press the button? Do I leave this, not glue this down, and allow myself to just pull it up and hit the button and put it over top? That may be the solution. I just don't know how that's going to look. I mean, I may decide to do it on along the edges. I'm not sure. Still trying to figure that out. What am I going to do with these lights? I want to light it up. And these lights sitting here forever, and got it in a sale. This would be a perfect project to use it on. Maybe if we did along the edges, or there's an idea. I could put this up top. Maybe make that into part of engineering. Make that part of engineering and dress it up. Otherwise, it's not so obvious. But I just thought of it. What if and this will be intricate. Maybe do it underneath. Let's leave it underneath. Now I have to draw this out. Started drawing the rooms out. Wasn't sure what I was going to do with the front ends. Now I kind of do. Alright, so we leave the wires down there. Now what if we just surrounded the entire room underneath the grande grade? Think about doing the hallways. Like all the hallways. Of course, we've got one standing out there. Like I said, it would mean that I will have to draw out all the rest of the hallways. I think that's what I'm going to do. And it'll be underneath the granny grade. It will be a challenge. Alright, so my plan with the granny grade then is, if I do this right, put this down, draw it out first, finish drawing it out. And then I will make a room here, make the ramp there. I mean, instead of just coming up here and going all around and snaking it, I could weave it, poke a hole here, come up and go down the hall. Where it gets challenging because I don't want to cover them up too much. Because once you lay the granny grade, now what I'll do is I'll assuming that it's all drawn out. Okay, you glue this down, you glue the other one down, cut it out around it, all the holes, etc. And then I'm going to use patented technique or style of creating maps by DM Scotty. Do 2.5D, some just strips of cardboard across there as the wall. It'll represent the wall, and we'll put doors, some kind of representation to doors. I may print one, who knows, and make them full 3D. So what is the best way to do this so that the lights aren't blocked completely by the 2.5D walls? And I think what it is I'm going to put 2.5D walls on this layer, put the lights on them. Yeah, and then 2.5D on top of this. So that way there's a buffer between the granny grade and the lights and the walls, etc. So I've got to lay that out. Probably the best way to do it. And then we have one deck. So we'll just have engineering cruise quarters, tactical, or communications, one or the other. And then these pods will contain command or the bridge or something like that. Okay, so that's the plan. Okay, now on to the ramp that goes into the ship. First, I had to cut out that big plastic piece that was in the way, used to keep the landing gear from going up inside the ship.
I measured it out to make sure it was precise. I want to be able to make it functional, so I wanted to make sure that it fit perfectly. So of course it has to come up through the deck. So I measured it out and cut it out of the cardboard, and my first thought was use the cardboard as part of the ramp. Eventually I pivoted away from that and started using a piece of plastic. And then on top of that, I realized originally that was a landing gear, and it has all the mechanisms to drop in and out. And so I cut up the landing gear just enough to create the effect of a ramp going into the ship. There were some complications with that in regards to the landing gear, remembering that if it was a landing gear originally, it is the same height as the rear landing gear, and I didn't think of that. So I glued in the rear landing gear at its top height and realized that the ramp would be too steep. So I either make an extension or you put shorter landing gear in the front and let it dip. And that turns out that that's what I did, and I still think it looks pretty good. I did mention that I was going to use the seats from the Cloud City pod ship as part of the ramp, because it has some pretty good texture and it looked pretty good. As long as I can get it on there at least halfway decent, it'll look like a ramp. So I did, and you'll see me cutting them up and cutting pieces off of it and gluing it to what eventually becomes the ramp. All right, we're going to go cut this in half and prep it for attaching to this big beast. There's the graveyard of cuts in the past. Here we are at the bandsaw once again. All right, working in 94-degree South Carolina weather in my garage to get these pod pieces onto the Falcon, what's left of the Falcon, my new ship. I used my Dremel tool to cut into the sides here, and then as you can see, I mounted them with screws rather than glue. Those are not going anywhere. Now when I put the cardboard back, I'm going to have to cut out a square for it to fit. Right now the cardboard is drying. Painted it, put down the first layer of walls with the intent of putting lights in them, and then I'm going to put granny grate over top of that, and then new walls, actual walls for the deck plan. The next thing is to cut this to fit the gun or that other piece of the ship. Another thing I did was I cut into here, and it's kind of messy, but I'm hoping paint can cover that up. I cut out the battery rack enough to put down a piece of plastic for a floor and make that an airlock. And these holes will be covered with something. I may even dress them up with some other bits, maybe some applesauce tops. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to show you. I've used these in other crafts, but in this case, I have an idea. It almost lines up perfectly for an extension to square off on both sides, the back end of it, so that it kind of gets squared off and it looks even more different from the Falcon. I've seen people do something like that. I don't know how they did it, but this is how I'm doing it. I'm going to mount these here, probably just a screw into this, or maybe just glue. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. And both sides, oops, sorry, right here. I can't hold the phone and hold then cover this up and make it a part of the engine. So what I want to do
I have some spare parts from another project. These pieces I plan to use on the back. I'll probably cut a lot of that plastic off, but they kind of look like engines. I may cut them in half so they're not so long, but this will go on back here, and then we'll dress it up to make it look different, but it'll be the engines, I think. And yeah, I'll cut off a lot of that. So far, so good. The summer got busy, so I was unable to set up and record my progress on the ship as often as I wanted to. Instead, I took pictures, so here they are. Here you can see I used some styrene plastic to cover up the cockpit holes in the cloud pod ships. I would later dress those up with different things like beads and other things. I also covered the hole where I cut the pod ships with other plastic, but later I will print doors for those spaces. I also used an old sample credit card that I got in the mail some time ago to cover up the floor in the airlock. I made a bunch more modifications, especially in the forward section, to get the forward gun to fit. It's not perfect, but it's not bad either. I used mostly strong crazy glue to nail it down with the help of some wooden dowels to center it in place. The deck floor finally came into its own when I placed the painted granny grid over the floor. About half the lights were used to light up underneath. Priming and base painting was next, as the ship finally started to look like one piece. Here you can see that I added some parts to the pod ship to dress it up a little. This process seemed to go on forever because even after I felt the paint job was done, I was adding more and more detail pieces and greebles to enhance its look. I'm not sure how well you can see, but the lights were all finally placed in the ship and it looked pretty good. I'm happy with it. What bothered me the most, however, was the granny grade. It needed something to break it up, and I looked online in all the crafting groups I'm in for some ideas. I came up with the idea of a half-inch square checkerboard pattern with some cardstock. This was a slow and methodical process that took about a week, but I was pleased with the result. Then the painting process started. For the big ship, I went with a gray and blue scheme, highlighting the raised sections with English navy blue. I was inspired by the World War II TBM Avenger in my painting scheme for the smaller ship. I went with the English navy on top and a summer sky blue on the bottom, but the top needed something more. I was further inspired by college football and took some yellow to enhance some of the paneling patterns on the ship. College football influence came from the yellow horn-like things going up the cockpit, giving the ship its name, the Wolverine. Not saying I'm a fan, but I found it inspiring. Just when I thought I was done, I realized I still had some lights and still had a place to put them. I decided to go ahead and put them in the top. Place the lights in as many places visible as I could, but some of them just hang there and light up the inside. I was real happy with the end result. Another area that really bothered me was the landing gear holes for the Cloud City. I simply covered them up with a piece of rectangular plastic and it looked awful. I had these dollar store light up toy laser guns that I had seen someone else use for something similar, and I got inspired. I took them apart and yes, removed the lights and the wiring because they didn't work anymore. Then I cut off the handles and all of a sudden they looked like pods, escape pod. I swapped the plastic covers out with these things and I love them. One red, one blue. That's okay. I think it looks cool. Okay, this is as far as I'm concerned, a more or less complete project. It's a little big for my desk, so I'm going to film this in two aspects so that you at least get a good look at it. I finished painting it, and I finished painting the fighter bomber fighter. I'm real happy with how that turned out, actually. I mean, there's some stuff that I kind of wish I'd done differently, made it look different. The underneath is a little rough because of the putty and some hot glue, but lessons learned. It's still, as far as I'm concerned, table ready.
I completed it with that whole Wolverine look. The wings look good, and looks like a complete one piece. I like it. Now, the big dog, which now is I'm gonna call the Midnight Blues, is complete. Now I'm gonna turn on these lights so that you can see. Hard to see in the camera, I get it, but make sure you can see some of these. Oh, maybe not. There's light here, there's light here, and then front end has light right there. Lights are appearing all over the ship, underneath and above. I glued down all the consoles. This guy's been in there the whole time. I didn't know it. Oh, I haven't finished this part, and I'll explain that in a minute. There is a part 2 to this that I'm going to do just for the adventure, and I'm going to glue these down as a representation to ladders that go up to a second deck. This second deck is going to be this, and it's pretty straightforward and simple. Again, too big for the screen. We've got the ladders that come up here, and this is the turret that's here. This is over engineering. And these are 3 separate rooms, probably captain's quarters and various other things. Officers' quarters, captain's quarters, and storage. And these are just painted right now. I'm still working on getting details. This is the airlock. I figured it's going to take up more than one floor. I also added 2 portions that are about the shape of the pods that are on the side. I needed a deck plan for that, so this is just the deck, and I'm going to probably put some detail out with some foam core, not necessarily bits like I have inside the big ship, but at least something that represents consoles. It's just one room for the bridge or tactical, whatever. So that's next, and I'm going to cut it off the cardboard. This was just an effort to glue the foam core down to the cardboard to keep it all flat, give it a support. So that is it. The Midnight Blues complete. I don't know where I got that name. I just kind of came up with it. ChatGPT may have helped. Oh, yeah, and I did make ladders for these, but they interfered with the connecting with the top. So I'm just going to put markers, kind of virtual markers, representations of ladders. So that is a complete big project. Took me all summer. I'm bringing it to Mythicon 2025, assuming that nothing interferes. In Charlotte, this will probably be a Savage Star Frontiers adventure. I'm going to have characters try to either take the ship or get something off the ship and then fight their way back, and then a second stage is something else. So there you have it. Until next time, remember, seek the wolf in thyself.